If you guys aren't excited about a new 50mm prime for your full-frame Sony mirrorless camera, then I don't know what's wrong with you. All kidding aside, this is the third 50mm fast prime that has been released in 2023 for full-frame Sony mirrorless cameras. And it just goes to show how popular the 50mm focal length is. They're dropping variants of this lens like iPhone, iOS updates after a new iOS is released. It wasn't that long ago that I was reviewing the Sigma 50mm f1.4 Art. That was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And now today we have the 50mm f2. This is the DGDN. It's an I-series lens, which means all metal build. Really nice design. So let's check this thing out. The lens comes in a larger than expected white box. Inside there are manuals, the lens with plastic lens caps, a metal lens hood, and a magnetic lens cap in addition to the plastic one. Now because this is an I-series, it's all metal in build and it feels solid. I think these are the best lenses that Sigma makes in terms of build, even over their Art lineup, which is more premium, at least in price. This 50mm is compact. It's 70mm by 70mm or 2.8 inches by 2.8 inches. Very, very close to the size of the Sigma 20mm f2, and it weighs 345 grams, which is a nice weight for a metal lens. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount with electronic connections, a rubber gasket here at the mount for dust and splash resistance, but the lens is not otherwise weather sealed. Lens specs at the bottom: contemporary C logo, autofocus manual focus switch, 023 for a 2023 release, and a Sigma logo. Aperture ring is nice and clicky and moves from f2 to f22 and then a longer click into auto A. It feels great as it does on every I-series lens. This lens is made in Japan and minimum focus distance is 0.45 meters. In front there is a nice and smooth focus ring which is very well damped and spins in either direction to infinity because it is 100% electronic. Finally, around the front there is a small concave front lens element with no writing or specs here. Very clean design overall. Inside there are 11 elements in 9 groups and a 9 rounded blade diaphragm. It looks great on the camera. It's a great size that is noticeably more compact than the f1.4 Art from Sigma that I recently reviewed. According to Sigma, this lens is 37% shorter and 48% less heavy than that newly released Art. Although with the lens hood on, you'll gain quite a bit of overall length. So let's take a look at some portraits taken with this new 50mm and my Sony a7C and my wife. All of these are straight out of the camera, no editing, no corrections, ready, set, go. Okay, so this is a brilliant lens, really breathtakingly sharp, excellent colors and contrast. You really cannot ask for much more than this in a portrait lens. Distortion is well controlled, vignetting is well controlled, flare resistance is pretty good, even that pesky chromatic aberration that you see on every lens is pretty well controlled here. It shows a little bit more green fringing than purple at times, but overall the performance is excellent. Then you move into bokeh and it's up there with the best of the best. It's very smooth, not distracting or busy. It almost looks swirly at times. The edges and corners do turn into cat eye or footballs, but there's no onion ringing or outlining. The 9 circular aperture blades are doing their job. In terms of autofocus, I thought that this lens was going to suffer because of the older style stepper motor, but it didn't. It was more than fast enough, although I will admit it's not as lightning quick as the new linear motor on the 50mm f1.4 Art. But optically, I didn't have any complaints about this lens. From a build quality standpoint, there is nothing wrong with this lens, and for the price of $639 US, it's an absolute bargain for what you're getting for performance. Now, I was going to talk about this in another video, but I think that it is fitting for what I'm talking about in this video, so I'm going to discuss it here, and this is my opinion, but I've discussed this with a professional videographer friend of mine, and he agrees with me. So I think that we're onto something. Okay, I've drawn a little graph here, and here's what it looks like. In the very beginning, you start out probably shooting up here at something like f5.6, f6.3, because, well, that's the gear that you have. You don't really have fast lenses, so you shoot with the kit lens, you're zooming in at 50mm with the kit lens, it's at f5.6, you don't really care, or you've not mastered your settings on your camera, which could be an issue, or you just don't know what you're doing, you're shooting in auto. So you're shooting with a pretty closed, pretty dark aperture, and a lot of the stuff is in focus, like a lot of your frame is in focus. So that's the very beginning, that's where you start. As you progressively get more and more experience, you notice the effects and really the brilliance of shooting wider open. And so you get down here where you're shooting lenses at f0.95 because now you've purchased them, you have the money for them, you like the look, everything's blurry. I mean, the only thing that's in focus is the pupil of your model's eye, the nose is blurry, the ears are blurry, hair is blurry, everything in the background and the foreground is blurry, and it's really cool. But I think that after a little while, you start to notice that this is not really ideal. This f0.95, really even f1.4 or 1.2 is not really ideal for every single situation, and you start to dial it back a little bit and you start to stop down your shots a little bit. So I've been finding myself, and I'm not saying that I'm maturing in photography, I'm not saying anything, but I'm finding myself, even for client work or for my own family portraits, I'm stopping the lenses down just a little bit, just to get at least the front of the face all in focus. So this is very important, I think, for you guys to understand, because yes, it's very cool to shoot at f0.95 or to spend $2,000 and shoot at f1.2, but do you really need to? Probably not. And I will say this is my opinion, and this really only applies to full-frame Sony mirrorless cameras, because if you're shooting on APS-C, you need as fast a lens as you can get, because low light performance is not as good on APS-C as it is on full-frame. So for APS-C stuff, f1.4 all the way. And if you really didn't get anything from that drawing and that chart and you felt like you were back in calculus class, well, I'm sorry, but the moral of the story is f2 is great for professional work. You don't need f1.4 or f1.2 or f0.95 on your full frame camera if you're doing portrait work. Again, that's my opinion. Some people like to shoot at 135 and f0.95, so I'm not going to stop them. Another reason I'm saying this is because if you look at a $2,000 Sony 50mm f1.2 G Master versus this 50mm f2 for an impressively low $639 US, it's a crazy thing. There is a lot of value here, and I would argue that the build is better with this Sigma. The size is definitely smaller, it's much lighter, and again, more of your subject's actual face will be in focus. So I don't know, those are all selling points, at least for me. If you are looking at this Sigma I Series 50 and the new Sigma Art 50, that's a tough choice. Again, the autofocus performance of the Art is noticeably better, especially if you do video. It is lightning fast. This one is more than adequate, but a little bit slower. But on the flip side, the Art lens is bigger and heavier. This f2 lens is better built, it's all metal, and it's $200 or so cheaper, so it's up to you. If you are looking at those two lenses specifically, I would consider two things. Are you going to be using these 50mm lenses in low light situations at night, trying to do nighttime portraits? If you are, that f1.4 is definitely going to make a difference, so I'd go for the Art lens. And number two is, are you really wanting weather sealing? Because this lens is weather sealed just at the mount, whereas the Art lens is fully weather sealed. They don't call it weather sealing, they call it full dust and moisture resistance. But if you're out in the elements, the Art lens is going to be less of a liability than this lens. However, if you're just using a portrait lens outside in the sunshine on a normal day that's not super rainy or snowy, then the performance difference between this f2 and that f1.4 G Master really, in many eyes, is going to be negligible. This really is a great little 50mm f2 lens. It's the Nifty 50 that Sony never made. So that is going to be it for my review of this new lens. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. Are you excited about this 50mm? Are you completely tired of me reviewing 50mm full frame lenses? Let me know what's your favorite out of the three that launched this year. Always curious to read your guys' comments. I'm excited for all the new stuff that's coming out, so stay tuned for more. Have a great day. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.